"Congratulations," my brother-in-law said, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "You finally get to see what it looks like when a real woman makes my brother happy." I was holding a glass of water. I set it down very carefully. My husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, though the ink wasn't dry yet, was sitting right beside him. He didn't say anything, he just looked at the table, which I suppose was its own kind of answer. My sister was sitting across from me. She had been my sister for 34 years. She looked at the flower arrangement in the center of the table instead of at my face. I picked my glass back up, took a slow sip, and I said, "You're right, I hope you both enjoy it." That was 18 months ago. Let me back up. I met my husband at a work conference in Chicago when I was 29. He was presenting on supply chain logistics, which sounds like the least romantic thing in the world, and yet, he had this way of explaining complicated things simply, this patient, methodical quality that I mistook for steadiness. We dated for 2 years. We got married in September, outdoor ceremony, string lights, the whole thing. My sister was my maid of honor. Her name is Felicity. She's 3 years younger than me. Growing up, people always said we looked alike, same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones from our mother's side. We were close the way sisters are when they've shared a bedroom and survived the same parents, and built their adult lives in the same city by accident. She was my emergency contact, I was hers. That's the kind of close I'm talking about. My husband's name is Warren. He worked in operations management for a distribution company. Good salary, stable job, owns his condo outright, the kind of financial profile that makes your parents exhale. His family is from Charlotte. Big family, lots of cousins, the kind of Thanksgiving where you need 3 tables. I liked them, mostly. His mother was warm to me for the first year. After that she was polite, which is different. The thing about my marriage is that I could feel it changing before I had language for it. There were small shifts. Warren started coming home later, not dramatically late, not in a way I could point to, just later. 30 minutes here, an hour there. He stopped asking about my day in that genuine way he used to, the way where he'd actually listen and follow up on things I'd mentioned the week before. He started being on his phone more at dinner, not even hiding it, just present somewhere else while his body sat across from me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had a therapist at the time. I'd been seeing her since my dad got sick 2 years before, and I mentioned it to her, these vague feelings of distance. She asked good questions. I didn't have good answers. Everything I said sounded like nothing when I said it out loud. The first concrete thing I noticed was a name in his phone. He'd left it on the counter when he went to shower, and it buzzed. And I looked without meaning to, the way you do, and the name that came up was Felicity with a small green heart next to it. I stood there for a moment. Then I thought, they're family now. Of course they text. I want to tell you that I immediately investigated, that I was sharp and decisive and caught them quickly. That's not what happened. What happened is that I talked myself out of it for 4 more months. I told myself stories. I told myself Felicity was probably texting him about my birthday, about the holidays, about some surprise. I told myself I had anxiety, and I knew I had anxiety, and this was just that. And then I came home early from a work trip. I'd been in Denver for a conference. The last session got canceled. The speaker had a family emergency, and they refunded our hotel nights, and I was on the 4 p.m. flight back instead of the 8 a.m. the next morning. I texted Warren from the airport. He didn't respond. That wasn't unusual. He was bad at responding when he was in meetings. I took an Uber from O'Hare. I let myself into our apartment. I could hear the television on in the living room. That was unusual because Warren didn't really watch TV on weekday evenings. My sister was sitting on my couch. She jumped up when she saw me. Warren came out of the kitchen holding 2 glasses of wine. There was a moment where nobody moved. I am not going to describe in detail what happened in the next 20 minutes because some of it is still too raw, and some of it is just humiliating, in the ordinary way that these things are humiliating. There was crying, Felicity's, initially. There was denial, Warren's briefly, then not. There was a point where my sister reached out to touch my arm and I took a step back and she withdrew her hand and didn't try again. The short version. It had been going on for 7 months. Warren said he hadn't been planning to tell me like this. He said he'd been trying to figure out the right time. He said, and this is the part I still think about sometimes, he said he was sorry I had to find out this way, as though the problem was the method of discovery and not the 7 months themselves. I asked them both to leave my apartment. Then I sat on the floor for a while. Then I called my best friend, Joanna, who drove 40 minutes in traffic to sit with me. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Warren didn't fight it. We didn't have children. The apartment was in my name. I'd put the down payment down with money I'd inherited from my grandmother, and I'd had the foresight, or maybe the instinct, to keep it that way. We had a joint account for household expenses that we divided without too much argument. The process was clean in the legal sense, which doesn't mean it didn't hurt. What hurt more, honestly, was my sister. My parents were devastated in a way that made everything harder. My mother called me crying, and then called Felicity crying, which is a very specific kind of pain, being grieved over equally by your mother alongside the person who wronged you. My father didn't call either of us for 2 weeks and then called me and said he didn't know what to say, which I respected more than I wanted to. Felicity's portion of our family's Thanksgiving was awkward. My aunt kept looking between us. My cousin made a joke that landed wrong and then apologized. I left early. Warren and Felicity became official about 2 months after the divorce was finalized. She posted a photo of them on Instagram. They were at Navy Pier. She had her head on his shoulder, and the lake was behind them, and she was smiling the way she smiles in photos, that specific tilted smile I'd watched her practice in the bathroom mirror when we were teenagers. I unfollowed her. Not dramatically. I just did it one afternoon while I was sitting in my car in the parking garage at work. Then I sat there for another 10 minutes before I went inside. I want to be honest here. I did not immediately become a strong, unbothered woman who was thriving. There were months that were genuinely bad. I cried in my car a lot. I gained weight and then lost it and then gained it back. I didn't date anyone for over a year because I felt, in some not quite rational way, like I had lost the ability to read people, and I didn't trust my own judgment yet. But I also kept working. I am a financial analyst for a mid-size high consulting firm. I'd been there for 6 years at that point, and I was good at my job in the steady, unglamorous way that actually matters, not the flashiest person in the room, but the one people came to when the numbers didn't add up. 8 months after the divorce, my director left for another company, and I was asked to step in on an interim basis. 4 months after that, it was made permanent. My title became Senior Financial Analyst. My salary became something I didn't feel the need to apologize for. I started running. Not for weight or wellness in any Instagram sense, just because I needed somewhere to put the energy that used to go into a marriage. I ran 3 mornings a week before work, loop through Lincoln Park, headphones in, pavement, morning light. It helped. And I had Joanna. I don't think I say that enough even in my own head. I had Joanna, who showed up the night everything fell apart and who kept showing up, who let me be angry and boring and repetitive about my grief without once making me feel like I was too much. She would later tell me she had never liked Warren, which I believed, and that she'd had a bad feeling about Felicity for years, which I believed even more. About 14 months after the divorce was finalized, my mother had a minor health scare. Nothing serious in the end, a procedure, a good prognosis, a few days in the hospital for monitoring. But my parents live 45 minutes outside the city, and I drove out twice that week to sit with her. On the second visit, my father stepped out to get coffee from the cafeteria, and I was alone with my mother. And she reached over and took my hand and said, "Felicity wants to visit tomorrow." I said, "Okay." My mother said, "She wants to bring Warren." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "That's her choice to make." My mother said, "She's still your sister." I said, "I know she is." I didn't say anything else about it, and neither did she. And my father came back with 3 coffees and a bag of those shortbread cookies from the vending machine that I have always inexplicably loved. We sat together for another hour and talked about other things, his tomato plants, a documentary they'd been watching, whether the Bears had any shot that season. They didn't. When I left, I hugged both of them for a long time. I did not come back the next day. I want to say that clearly. I chose not to be there when Felicity and Warren visited my mother. That was a deliberate choice. People have opinions about it. My aunt told my cousin, who told me that she thought it was cold. One of my mother's friends apparently said something about how family has to come first. I understand those perspectives. I also know what I was and wasn't capable of at that time, and I made the decision that I made. The dinner was 6 weeks after my mother came home from the hospital. It was supposed to be a family dinner, the kind we do every few months, rotating houses, whoever can make it. My aunt was hosting. It hadn't occurred to me that Warren and Felicity would be there because they had never been to a family dinner before. She'd always attended separately, and after everything, I assumed she'd keep doing that. I arrived first. I helped my aunt carry things in from the car. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen asking about her garden, and everything was fine. And then the door opened and my sister walked in with Warren behind her. And behind Warren was his brother Damon, who I had met maybe 4 or 5 times at family events during my marriage, and I understood that this was not an accident. The dinner table had been arranged so that Felicity and Warren were directly across from me. Damon was to Warren's left. My aunt kept moving in and out of the kitchen, my cousin was trying. My father sat at the head of the table, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. My mother smiled determinedly at everyone. For 40 minutes I participated in normal conversation. I asked my cousin about his new job. I told my aunt that the roast was genuinely the best she'd ever made. I drank 1 glass of wine slowly. I was fine. And then Damon made his comment. "Congratulations," he said, looking right at me. "You finally get to see what it looks like when a real woman makes my brother happy." Warren said nothing. Felicity looked at the flower arrangement. I set my glass down carefully. I took a slow breath. I looked at Damon and I said, "You're right. I hope you both enjoy it." Then I excused myself to use the restroom, where I stood over the sinks for 60 seconds with the water running, and then I came back and finished the meal. I want to explain what I mean by "you're right," and I hope you both enjoy it, because at the time it sounded like concession and it was not. 4 weeks before that dinner, I had received a call from a recruiter. Not a cold call, a targeted reach out, based on my profile and a referral from a former colleague I respect. The position was Director of Financial Strategy at a mid-size healthcare consulting firm. It was a significant step up. The base salary was $47,000 more than what I was making. There was an equity component. There was a small team that would report to me. I had been in conversations with them for 3 months. I had done 4 rounds of interviews. 1 week before that dinner, they had sent me a formal offer letter, which I had reviewed with an employment attorney, negotiated 2 points on, and signed. I started the following Monday. Warren had spent the last year and a half telling people, in the way that information moves through family circles, that the divorce had been hard on him financially, that he'd had to dip into his savings, that things were tight. I knew this because my cousin mentioned it once, neutrally, the way people do when they're passing information without taking a side. I nodded and said that divorce is hard on everyone and changed the subject. What Warren did not know is that 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I had spoken to a financial planner, someone Joanna recommended, a woman named Beverly who had been doing this for 22 years. I had spent 3 sessions with Beverly doing what I now think of as clearing the rubble, figuring out exactly where I stood, what I had, what I needed, and what the next 5 years looked like if I made deliberate choices. The choices I made: I maxed out my 401(a) contributions for 2 years straight. I opened a brokerage account and put money in every month, nothing dramatic, consistent. I paid down the remaining balance on my car. I did not make any large purchases that weren't necessary. I refinanced my mortgage at a better rate when the timing was right. These are not interesting choices. They are the kind of choices that feel invisible until they're not. By the time of that dinner, my net worth was in a different category than it had been the day I found my sister on my couch. Not dramatically, not in a way that would make headlines, but solidly, meaningfully different. The kind of different that means options. I did not announce any of this at the dinner table. I said, "You're right, and I hope you both enjoy it," and I finished my meal and helped my aunt clear the plates, and I kissed my parents goodnight, and I drove home. The call came 11 days later. It was Warren. He called my cell, which surprised me. We hadn't spoken directly since the divorce was finalized. I almost didn't pick up. I picked up. He said he needed to talk to me about something. His voice was doing the thing it does when he's uncomfortable, a certain flatness, like he's reading hard. I said, "Okay." He said that Felicity was pregnant. I waited. He said things had been harder than he expected, that the pregnancy was unplanned. That Felicity wasn't working right now. She'd left her job, a marketing coordinator position she'd had for 3 years, right around when they went public as a couple, and she hadn't found anything since. He said his savings had taken a hit. He said he was telling me this because he hoped, and here is the part that still astonishes me. He hoped I might be willing to talk to my parents about helping them out financially. Just temporarily. Just while things stabilized. I held the phone very still. I said, "Warren, I'm not going to do that." He said he thought, given that Felicity was my sister. I said, "I think this is a conversation for you to have with my parents directly. I'm not going to be in the middle of it." He said he understood. He paused. And then he said quietly, "I made mistakes." I said, "I know." And then neither of us said anything for a moment, and I said I had to go, and I hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. I thought about the string lights at our wedding. I thought about the night I drove home from the airport and let myself into my own apartment and the television was on. I thought about the floor I sat on after I asked them both to leave. I texted Joanna, he called. Felicity is pregnant. He wanted me to ask my parents for money. She responded in about 45 seconds. Absolutely not. Then, are you okay? I thought about it. I typed back, yeah, actually, I think I am. I told my parents myself, not because Warren asked me to, but because I thought they deserved to hear it from someone who loved them without an agenda. I called my mother on a Sunday morning. I told her what Warren had told me. I told her I had no opinion about what they chose to do with the information and that I was not asking them to take sides. I told her I loved her. She cried a little. My father got on the phone at some point and didn't say much, just listened. They decided, on their own, to help Felicity. A loan, not a gift. My father was clear about that, which I thought was very him. He's an accountant, retired. He doesn't give money without paperwork. I did not begrudge them that decision. They're her parents too. What I did, I kept going to work. I kept running my loop through Lincoln Park 3 mornings a week. I kept my sessions with my therapist, who by that point knew me well enough to notice the specific quality of my okay that meant I actually was okay. I had a first date with someone Joanna set me up with, which was fine, and a second date which was better, and I'm not going to say more about that because some things are still unfolding, and I don't want to narrate them before I know what they are. My title at work became Director of Financial Strategy. My team is 4 people. We are good together. Damon's comment at the dinner table, a real woman who makes my brother happy. I've thought about it a lot. Not with anger anymore, mostly with something that doesn't have a precise name. Pity would be too simple. Clarity is closer. Because what he said was meant to diminish me, and what it actually did was confirm that I had been measuring myself against something that was never going to fit me right. I had spent years trying to be the wife Warren wanted, the daughter-in-law his family expected, the better sister, the more patient version of myself. And when it fell apart, I thought the failure was mine. It wasn't. I know that now, in a way that doesn't require me to say it loudly. I set my glass down that night and I said, "You're right," and I meant, I see exactly what this is, and I am the only one at this table who does. And I drove home to my apartment, my name on the deed, my grandmother's money turned into square footage and morning light and a kitchen I like. And I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the window for a while looking out at the city. It was a Tuesday. I had an early meeting. I set my alarm, I washed my face, and I went to sleep. That's how it ends. Not with a scene, not with a confrontation. Just with me in my own home on a regular night, with a life that is quietly, steadily, entirely mine.